Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The ceremony is about to begin.
Good morning. How are we all doing today? Excuse me 1 second. That's a really good start. Another good start is the fact that some of the stuff that I'd written down for today just vanished about 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to have to wing some of this. Obviously, today's show is going to be very serious in nature. But before we get to the main part of all of that, a couple of things that I'd like to tell you. I want to remind you that very quickly that on Wednesday next week, we will be joined by none other than Tim Bernhardt, one of the senior directors at JCB, where we will talk about all things non-road mobile machinery, NRMM. That's on Wednesday night, which is, that's kind of in keeping with our usual fare. But on Monday, we have a guest coming on the show. We had a phone call. We had an email, actually, yesterday to say that a man, had watched our show yesterday and would like to come on the show. I had a look to see who he was and what it was he did. It turns out he's one of the people that is standing for the position of Mayor of London. And he wants to come on the show on Monday. There he is, Sean Batra. He is standing as an independent, and he is standing basically against Sadiq Khan. He comes from a property background, so he knows a bit about construction. He's got some very strong thoughts on things like planning permission, potholes, roads, ULEZ, lots and lots of other things as well. So, Monday's show is going to be a little bit weird, but I'm glad because, it does bring the changes a little bit. Now, obviously, we do need to get on to the main part of all of this. Just going to clear the decks because I want to do this properly. As I say, up until a few moments ago, I had a very detailed script. That script seems to have gone completely out of the window. I tell you what, I'm going to pause very quickly. David Turpin, good morning, David says, it's taken too much time. Totally agree. Good morning. Condolences to all families involved in the Didcot disaster, says Dan Cullen. Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. It's Didcot Day. Hopefully the truth will prevail. It would be lovely to think so. And Gary Muirhead says, rest in peace, the Didcot for brothers in arms. Michael Collins, Ken Cresswell, Chris Huxtable and John Shaw, gone but definitely not forgotten. We will keep the fight going for justice for you and your families. Thank you very much indeed for that. And misplaced comment of the day comes from somebody that goes by the name of Islam is Peace. Talk about Gaza. No, we will not. And Mick Saunders says, good morning all on a sad day. So let's do that, shall we? On this day, 8 years ago, 4 demolition workers needlessly lost their lives. Mick Collins, Ken Cresswell, Chris Huxtable and John Shaw were all killed when the boiler house at Didcot A power station collapsed and they were consumed by thousands of tons of steel. Now, when I think of that day, I like to tell myself that the 4 men were here one moment and gone the next, that they knew nothing and they felt nothing, that it was all over in an instant. There was no prolonged pain or suffering. The same, sadly, cannot be said of the friends and family they left behind. They were initially forced to endure some 7 months before the remains of their loved ones returned home. And that was bad enough. But they've since been forced to endure 8 years of an investigation that has delivered not a single finding, prompted not a single prosecution, nor provided a single ounce of closure. 8 years on, we do not know the precise cause of the accident that killed those 4 men. What I do know, because I know demolition, is that no one just allowed it to happen. The investigation has, however, been allowed to become cruelly protracted. Those responsible for the investigation have dragged their heels. Those in authority have allowed them to do so. Now, I do want to get into the chat. Today's show is not about me. It's about those that died, their families, and the wider industry that those deaths have impacted. But I would very much like to draw a comparison. I've mentioned in the past the fact that there was a similar incident in Ohio in the States in which 2 demolition workers were killed. And I've previously noted that their bodies were recovered in a matter of weeks, not months, and that the entire incident was investigated, prosecuted, and brought to a close in under 18 months. But that's America, and maybe they do things differently over there. So instead, I'd like to draw a comparison to a UK incident that I'm sure many of you will remember. On the 27th of January 2023, a lady called Nicola Bully disappeared while walking her dog at St Michael's on Wyre in Lancashire in the UK. Lancashire Constabulary said there was no evidence of either suspicious activity or third-party involvement in the disappearance, and they quickly stated that their working hypothesis was that she had fallen into the River Wyre. However, an extensive search of the river and the surrounding land involving police officers, helicopters, sniffer dogs, and drones found no body. Some was concerned that her body may have been carried downstream to the estuary at Morecambe Bay, some 13 miles away, and possibly even out into the Irish Sea. However, on the 19th of February, Nicola Bully's let me do that again. However, on the 19th of February, Nicola Bully I'm doing this with my teeth in now. However, on the 19th of February, Nicola Bully's body was found in the river about 1 mile downstream of St Michael's on Wyre. The inquest, which concluded in June 2023, determined that Bully's death was due to accidental drowning. Now, the police in that case were widely criticised for their handling of that case. But even though the search area they had to contend with could have been many, many square miles, they recovered the lady's body in less than a month. They delivered their findings in a matter of weeks, and the resulting inquest was done and dusted less than 4 months later. And they did all of that even though there were no witnesses and no physical evidence with which to work. Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive have thousands of tons of physical evidence and dozens, possibly even hundreds of witnesses. And yet 8 years on, they have failed to present any findings whatsoever. And while Lancashire Police were widely criticised for their handling of the Nicola Bully case, Thames Valley Police seems to have been given a free pass over Didcot. There's no criticism, no public inquiry, no officers falling on their swords or being held to account. Now, what conclusions can you draw from all of that? Maybe the police investigating Nicola Bully's disappearance were better funded, better supported, or just plain better than those investigating the Didcot disaster. Maybe it's easier to find and recover a body from miles of water than it is to recover 4 from a few hundred square meters of mangled steel. Or you could, like me, conclude that if you want an accident investigated quickly and the findings to be published just as fast, it's better for the victim to be an attractive, blonde, female financial advisor and not a demolition worker. Now, the chat is very busy today, and I'm going to get over to it in just a second. Yeah, I'll do that in just a second. But as they have done with each passing anniversary, Thames Valley Police have issued a statement to coincide with the 8th anniversary. As we've come to expect, it says a lot while saying basically nothing at all. But I will read it very quickly for you now. Today marks the 8th anniversary of the partial collapse at Didcot Power Station in 2016, which claimed the lives of 4 men. An investigation into the collapse is ongoing, with Thames Valley Police leading a joint inquiry with the Health and Safety Executive. The dedicated investigation team, which was put in place immediately after the collapse at Didcot, continues to investigate offences of corporate manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter, and health and safety offences. Ben Snuggs, and I can show you what Ben Snuggs looks like, actually. He looks like that. There you are. Ben Snuggs, Deputy Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, said, "As always, our thoughts remain with the families of Mick Collins, Ken Cresswell, Chris Huxtable and John Shaw following the loss of their loved ones. Thames Valley Police, together with the Health and Safety Executive, remains totally committed to rigorously investigating the collapse, and I'm very conscious of the time it's taking to investigate those circumstances. We maintain regular contact with the families and continue to provide updates and support through our dedicated family liaison officers and investigations team. This investigation is significant and complex with vast amounts of witness, digital and physical evidence, and we continue to make good progress with further suspect and key witness interviews. We are also in close liaison with the Crown Prosecution Service and continue to provide appropriate updates to key stakeholders and interested parties. It is our responsibility and duty to investigate thoroughly, following all reasonable lines of inquiry, and we will do everything we can to provide answers to the to the families." And I'm pretty sure that's basically what they said last year. and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. The National Federation of Demolition Contractors has also issued a statement. It's only one paragraph in length, but I'm not going to read it, mainly because it seems to be worded primarily to avoid upsetting the HSE, with whom they spent most of 2023 all cozy and nice. If you want to see it, go over to some of the other media who have reproduced it in the apparent belief that the NFDC is somehow relevant these days. So with all that out of the way, there is one thing that I want to do before I do anything else, and that is to say good morning to Natalie Huxtable, the younger sister, should I say, of Chris Huxtable, one of the 4 men that was killed. She is watching over on Instagram as we speak. Now, I am going to go over to the chat to see what you are all saying today. I've already done a few of these, but I'm going to go back to the one from Gary Muirhead, who says, rest in peace. Let me get Ben Slugs off the screen. Rest in peace. The Didcot 4, our brothers in arms. Michael Collins, Ken Cresswell, Christopher Huxtable, and John Shaw, gone but definitely not forgotten. We will keep the fight going for justice for you and for your families. Yes, we will. Mick Alder says, morning, all on a sad day. Yes, it is going to be interesting week next week. Yeah, Matt Malloy, and my mate Matt Malloy. I remember filming the recovery operation. So many people were waiting for news then and still now. No way. 8 years. 8 years. Think of all that's happened in 8 years. I think I did a quick off the top of my head calculation the other day. I think we've done 5 prime ministers since the collapse. And one of the things that bothers me with this, and as I say, the NFDC have issued a statement today, which I flatly refuse to read. They spent, I think there were 3 or possibly 4 events last week where the NFDC, the IDE, and the HSE basically worked together. I wouldn't work with the HSE right now if they were the last people on earth, because, as you know, obviously primacy on this case is with Thames Valley Police, but the Health and Safety Executive are their joint investigating partners, and they have done squat. So rather than sitting around being pally-pally, I would like to tear them off a strip, which I'll continue to do. Thinking about everybody concerned, you're in our hearts and minds. Yes, you very much are. Scott Jackson says, morning, Mark. Here we are again, 8 years later, and still no news on who is going to be accountable for the disaster that happened to these 4 men. And one of them was my friend, Mick Collins. Didcot has kind of fallen out of the national media spotlight. And you know, given all that's going on in Ukraine and in Gaza and everything else that's going on in the world, I kind of understand it. I don't like it, but I kind of understand it. But what those national media figures overlook, and I think what most people overlook, is the camaraderie within this industry. Gary Muirhead has already described the 4 men as our brothers in arms, and there is Scott Jackson, 8 years on, and still no idea what happened to his friend. Not a bloke, not a hairy ass demolition worker. His friend, his mate. 8 years. And again, you know, thoughts always are primarily with the families of the 4 men, but those families are much broader than mums and dads and husbands and cousins and sisters and brothers and that kind of thing. We're talking about a larger family. We're talking about the Demolition family. So, Scott, my thoughts are with you as much as they are with everybody else. Peter McKenna says, thought it was the 9th year mark. No, well, basically, as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, we are into the 9th year, if that helps. Hannah Wall says, it must be so hard for those poor men's families. It's taken too long and there have been no answers. I spoke to, hey, listen, I'm not telling you anything. I'll come back to Instagram in a second, because somebody's had a very good idea there, and I will come back to that in just a moment. You will recall that I spoke to a lady called Anne Mackay, who lost her husband in a separate accident up at Redcar at the Teesworks facility. And one of the things that came across with that is each phone call could potentially be some news. And initially that was, we have some news. Sadly, your husband has perished. We have some news. We've recovered his body, but we've been. I say we, but the 8 family or the 4 families of the guys that were killed there have now been forced to endure 8 years of watching that telephone, waiting for it to ring with some kind of answer. I personally, I don't think that's far short of emotional torture. I'm going to come to Mick Norton's comment in a moment, but somebody called O'Connor 5866 says we should crowdfund legal action against the use and against the HSE rather, and Thames Valley Police. I definitely contribute. I think it's an idea. One of the things that strikes me about this is how there has not been a public inquiry yet. In any other walk of life, if you handed somebody a job to do, you would expect them to have kind of a fixed timeline. That you would expect them to come up with a result, whatever that might be, a result within 8 years. And if you don't, then surely you should be held to account. Surely. Now, I'm going to go over to Mick Norton, who says, I've read today's Didcot comment from Duncan Riddell, CEO of the NFDC, and concur with his comment that there is little resolution thus far. However, and this is one of the other reasons that I didn't print it, basically, I totally disagree with his further point. We must remain patient and trust the process. I'll read the rest of what Mick has to say in just a moment. But that is the point. That is the point. And this is not, I don't want to go too far off at a tangent here, but this is not unusual for the practice of the NFDC. Several years ago, the Build UK, conglomerate of the biggest construction companies in the country, had basically signed up to a fair payment scheme where they basically agreed to pay people more quickly and on time, basically, as they should do. And a year later, they did a study that proved that literally none of their members had actually abided by those new regulations. The NFDC invited the chairwoman of said organisation, Build UK, along to their AGM, where she was given a speaker slot and a standing ovation. Yeah. So going back to the point made here by our friend Mick Norton, the NFDC should be highlighting how the HSE, Thames Valley Police and the CPS have failed to achieve an outcome and give the grieving families closure and those to blame prosecuted. Even a lengthy public inquiry would have finished a long time ago. Yeah. Yes, that precisely. The NFDC, I believed, wrongly as it transpires, I believed was there not to be pally-pally with the HSE, not to be pally-pally with the Thames Valley Police, not to be pally-pally with the Criminal Prosecution Service, but to hold those buggers to account, to stamp their feet, to shout loudly, and to use their, there's less of it now, but to use their heft to actually get something done. Instead of which, they've travelled around the country with their friends at the HSE. They've got their AGM coming up. Chances are somebody fairly senior from the HSE will be in attendance and they'll all be tipping their forelocks. Oh, what a fantastic guy he is. Bullshit. Let's have a look. Morning all, says Steve Williamson. Oh no, the Demolition Inquirer has got it wrong again. I think that's Construction Inquirer. In actual fact, I think if you read it correctly, I think they actually say we're entering the 9th year. All of what, all of what I'm saying kind of doesn't mean much, but this does. Natalie Huxtable, as I say, the little sister of Chris Huxtable, who's one of the guys lost there, says on Instagram, we've been stuck in this for 8 years since it happened. It's ruined our lives, and I have lost my other brother now as well. That's the reality. I can sit here and berate the Thames Valley Police. I can berate the NFDC. I can berate the Health and Safety Executive. I can berate Uncle Tom Cobley and all. It's my platform. I'll do whatever I damn well please. But there's a lady there who I've been speaking to for the best part of 8 years now. We've never actually met face to face, bizarrely, although hopefully we will do very, very soon. Ruined her life. Ruined her life. That's what we're talking about. Obviously, we've lost 4 of our brothers in arms, as Gary said. There's nothing we can do for those guys now. Nothing whatsoever. That day has passed. Ultimately, I assume there will be some sort of conclusion to this where we might know exactly why and how they died, but there's nothing we can actually do for Chris, for Ken, for John, or for Mick. They are beyond our help now. The remaining families, or the surviving families, that's where the help belongs. And one of the things that I find so hard to get straight in my head is the fact that those on the ground in this industry, on the day it happened, I know for a fact, there were men scrabbling over piles of steel trying to find their mates in amongst all of that. I think that the people that have been most vociferous since the day it happened are the guys with dirt under their fingernails who wear sight boots on a regular basis. The salt of the earth, demolition and construction worker, because there but for the grace of God go everyone. And yet we have an upper echelon of an industry who just carry on regardless. Mick Saunders says, health and safety executive in terms of Valley Police are a total non-entity in my eyes. In fact, the police today are a spent force. You only have to look at what's happening on our streets today. The government and all of this time have sat on their collective arses and done nothing. They have. Listen, you've all been around at least as long as I have. Some of you slightly longer. Didcot was mentioned in the House of Commons the day after it happened. I think it was David Cameron actually got to his feet and said, this is a terrible disaster, thoughts for the families and everything else. There were a couple of MPs that got their 15 minutes of fame a few months later when, things started to become protracted. There was a couple that crawled out of the woodwork around about the 1st, 2nd and 3rd anniversary. And where are they now? Where are they now? Nowhere to be seen. Dan Cullen says it's diabolical that they're getting away with it. No one taking into account. After 2 years, you would think they would have evidence required. I feel they're taking the piss. Zero progress, zero updates, zero care. Natalie Huxtable says, thank you for this. Bless you. Do you know one of the weirdest thing? I'm going to put this one up. Dan Cullen saying condolences to Natalie. One of the weirdest things about this is that I have no axe to grind here. I went to Didcot 2 or 3 times before the collapse happened, and several times since. It's possible that my path crossed with one of the guys that was killed. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And it feels unforgivable now that there were people there that maybe I didn't take my time, but I was there to do a job. So you get the guided tour and then you bugger off home. So as I say, I've got no real axe to grind with this. I'm not even a demolition person. I'm a journalist at the end of the day. I shouldn't be here doing this. But it struck me last night that none of us should. None of us should. The accident itself should never have happened. And the very fact that we're still talking about it 8 years later shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't. In the nicest possible way, and I do mean this from the absolute bottom of my heart, Natalie. In an ideal world, you and I would never have spoken. In an ideal world, we will never meet face to face because you will get what you need, and hopefully that will be enough to allow you to get on with your life rather than watching the telephone and waiting for some sort of answer. In an ideal world, we would never have encountered each other. but it is not an ideal world, and that has been allowed to just proliferate and be protracted over the course now of 8 years. Dan Cullen says, I know money doesn't and should never come into it, but I wonder how much has this investigation costing. I would like the money to go to the families as compensation for their loss. After all, these guys could have been the main and only income to their household. And to have that suddenly stop through no fault of their own must have put a lot of stress and strain on the families, not only coping with the loss of a loved one, but how are they going to manage financially? I know my household relays, and that's where we lose it. Yeah. I mean, I don't actually know their living situation, but going back to Natalie, she lost a big brother the day that Didcot collapsed, and since then she's lost another one. So she is brotherless now. All the money in the world wouldn't help that, but you would. I mean, I'd like to think that there has been some financial help offered to the families. Because as Gary rightly said, chances are, I realise this is a very old-fashioned opinion, but in many cases, it's certainly the case in my house. My wife works, but the primary breadwinner is yours truly. I'm sure that was the case with the guys that were killed. How do you make ends meet? Let's have a look. Peter McKenna. Deep sobs that start beneath my heart and hold my body in a grip that hurts. Yeah. Hairy-ass digger driver, eh? I know exactly what you mean. The lump that swells inside my throat brings pain that tries to choke. Then tears course down my cheeks. I drop my head in my so empty hands, abandoning myself to deep, dark grief, and know that with the passing time will come relief. That though the pain may stay, there soon will come a day when I can say your name and be at peace. In memory of those lost in the Didcot disaster, may they forever rest in peace. Would have been a very good way to end today's show, actually. Thank you for that, Peter. Andy Dovell says, morning, sorry I'm late, getting to the end of the world's wobbliest building right on the road. Fun times. Graham Williams, words can't be said what the family must be going through. For the inquest has not come back. It's terrible. The loss of people and brothers have lost their lives doing a job they love. Unfortunately, it's sad. Nothing has been done for the families. Yeah, it's kind of stating the obvious, but we've been here 7 times before. I covered the collapse extensively when it happened. I'm going to answer this with a non-answer, really. Just a quick question: has the NFDC given any financial support to the families? I don't know. Listen, they exist now in their own little world. What I do know is that I think it was the first anniversary, there were discussions on whether it was appropriate to have a 1 or a 4 minute silence in memory of the 4 guys. Like that matters. Mick Saunders says, morning, Natalie, my thoughts are still with you and the 4 fellas. We will get there, believe me. One way or another, the truth will come out. Yes, Mick. Yeah, we are. I feel like we're growing fewer. As I say, the politicians kind of faded away. Obviously, we've already said what we've said about the NFDC and the IDE. They faded away as well. Yes, they've got their little moment in the spotlight with their statement today, but they've faded away. The media, by and large, has faded away, and all that remains is us. Matt Malloy says the NFDC is a moribund, ineffectual, dying organisation with a membership being failed by its leaders. Well, I'm glad he said that. Whether or not I actually agree, I do, is neither here nor there, but thank you for that, Matt. Clifford Saunders, sorry, says 8 years is way too long for the families to wait. It's disgusting. And for the NFDC not to show a backbone and support our brothers in this is shameful. I've always been in the demolition industry and we were a brotherhood. Unfortunately, those days are gone. Yeah, in some ways, I totally agree. And just that last little bit, I do still think that at site level there is a brotherhood, that people look out for each other. Natalie just said, "Thank you all. I really do appreciate this. It helps a lot. Thank you again." And there's lots of kisses over there as well. Dan Cullen says there is no process in this. It's bloody 8 years. How much process do you need to get inquiries done and prosecution processed? I realise it was a strange comparison to draw, but just going back to that, the Nicola Bully thing. Young lady or youngish lady falls into a river and vanishes. Quite possibly, bearing in mind it happened in February, so they probably the river was probably running a bit quicker than usual because of rainwater and stuff. There was every possibility her body could have been carried out into the Irish Sea and hundreds and hundreds of square miles. Thankfully, it only travelled about a mile. It was recovered, and the whole thing was investigated. Post-mortems carried out, and all of those kind of things. Done and dusted. 6 months. Here, like I say, 7 months. And I realise there was tangled steel, but let's forget that on the day it happened, possibly while the remainder of the building was still creaking and singing in the background, the guys on the ground were actually amongst that steel trying to recover their fallen brothers. But the HSE and the Thames Valley Police threw a cordon around it and decided, no, we will recover whatever is left. 7 months hence. That, I think, gave us a bit of an insight and a preview of what was to come. They had no intention of hurrying whatsoever, and they have carried on with that. And I said early doors, the main reason for the investigation should be, one, to bring some explanation and some closure to the families and friends of those that were killed. And secondly, to provide the industry with an indication of what went wrong so that we could avoid a repeat. And somewhere third, fourth, or fifth, but a very, very distant third, fourth, or fifth, there should have been some desire to prosecute and hold to account those. If anyone was found negligent or have done something that they shouldn't have done, those should have been held to account. But that should have been a distant third, fourth, or fifth priority. Instead of which, from the very, very day that Didcot came down, that was the priority. That was the priority. And I know somebody mentioned earlier this notion of how much is the investigation cost. My guess would be it will run into the millions. It will run into the millions. And the Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive are eyeing the outcome. They are looking for a big prosecution, much the same as the CMA did in March last year, much the same as that. They will be looking to hit somebody with a big financial penalty to justify the 8 years that they have wasted. And don't let's lose any sight of the fact, I will get back to the chat in a sec. Don't let's lose sight of the fact that we're talking 8 years to date. Even if by some miracle, Thames Valley Police came on the radio this afternoon or the TV this afternoon and said, we are ready to roll. We are proceeding with the prosecution based on manslaughter or negligence manslaughter or whatever it might be. How long before that comes to court? A year? 2? How long will the court case take? Bearing in mind, we're talking about hundreds of statements, hundreds or thousands of pieces of evidence that will all have to be catalogued and presented and everything else. I could still be talking about this after I've retired. And I'm not 59 until Monday. Mick Norton says, the purpose of a public inquiry is 1, what happened? 2, why did it happen? Who is to blame? And 3, what can be done to prevent this from happening again? Which is the official way of saying what I just said, I think. But thank you for that. Let's have a look. The statement from the NFDC is an indictment of how useless the NFDC has become. I think everyone hoped for a change from them when Lynch and Riddell went on board. It's time now for them to be dissolved. Listen, with the rate that they are losing members through attrition more than anything else, I don't know. Mick Saunders. Still remember when I went to John's funeral, and as I said to you, Mark, I saw no one from the NFTC. I may be wrong, but not a face I recognised. And they, bizarre thing to say, but funerals used to be a big deal in the demolition industry. You'd always have a big turnout. When was the last one I went to? I went to Richard Comley's funeral. Must be, blimey, best part of 10 years ago, I guess. I can't honestly remember. And everyone was there. Now, Richard was a popular guy. He was, a big name in the Institute of Demolition Engineers, quite possibly the best president they never had. So he was a popular guy. But funerals in the past were a big opportunity for the industry to come out and do what funerals are designed for, to show your respect for your brother. I keep coming back. Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. It was one of the songs that was played at my dad's funeral, and that's really stuck in my head what Gary has said there. Brothers in Arms, because we are, even me, who spends virtually no time on demolition construction sites by comparison. When I set foot on one of those sites, I am relying on the guy that stood here, the guy that stood there, and the guy that stood behind me, because my life is in their hands. We are brothers in arms. Dan Cullen says, I feel for the guys that were on site on that fateful day. Have they received support? I think there was some initial counselling, but I know just a slight detour. So, yeah, maybe a year, possibly 18 months before Didcot. So sometimes 2014, 2015. I had an email from a guy who, where was he? He was in Bolivia, I think. Guy called Gabor, and he was a demolition guy over in. I'm fairly sure it's Bolivia, but don't hold me to it. But I'm fairly sure he was in Bolivia. And he said he was planning to come to the UK, partly because it's the UK, but also because he had a desire to become better at demolition and wanted to learn from, as he described it, the best. So when he decided he was going to make the trip, I offered to pay for him to go to an Institute of Demolition Engineers event. And my mate John Woodward paid for his, I think he paid for his accommodation, I paid for his food, and we brought this guy over. And this guy basically joined the industry very low level, despite the fact he'd been doing it for quite some time. He joined at a very low level, and he gradually worked his way through. He worked with, I think he worked with Armac for a little time, and various other people. And he ended up at Coleman's, and he was there on the day that it happened. And it happened. If memory serves me correctly, I think he was actually very, very close to Mick Collins when the building came down. And Gabor left the site. He went back to his digs, he packed up his gear, and he went back home again. He literally left the country and said, that's it, that's me done. That's the impact. The disadvantage of being an NFDC's patient is that the HSC, CPS and TVP, that's Thames Valley Police, will hold out for information that simply confuses or doesn't add any real strategic value to their bringing closure to the families or prosecuting those deemed culpable. Yeah, that's about the size of it. And listen, I'm so fucking angry with the Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive. I can barely keep a lid on it. But I do realise they face an incredibly complex job. They've got to find a smoking gun in millions, or not millions, but thousands of tons of steel. They've got to try and figure out if somebody was negligent. I understand all of that. I do understand all of that. But there must come a time when you think, probably, that is what contributed to it. And all of this other stuff, the fact that there was somebody on the site that morning, I don't know, making the tea. Do we really need to speak to her or him now? Does that matter anymore? Because we now know, that right there, that thing there, that proves what happened on that day. Everything else becomes meaningless at that point. And yes, you can go for your prosecutions and your big compensation payments and all the nonsense that goes with it. But ultimately, what this needs to deliver is a phone call to Natalie and to Sadie and all of the others to say, we're done. I can tell you, this is the reason that your loved one dies. Your loved one's died. This is how we're going to proceed from now on in. We will keep you informed, but that is what happened. 8 years, and we still haven't ascertained that? Really? Really? Jim Turner says, God bless the lads and their families, and God help those that aren't doing what they should to sort out this terrible mess. Lou Carney, in a single emoji, summing up what I think most of us are probably feeling today. Mick Saunders says, Peter, that sums up what many of us feel. Thank you for posting that. It becomes a bit trite, really, doesn't it? You know, I even thought about this a week or so ago. I mean, I was committed to doing something today, but I wonder quite what what I am contributing to the discussion now. Because to be perfectly honest, I mean, I've my feelings on all of this have gone through all of the stages that they can possibly go through. The day after, when I was up there, was shock, and I've gone through shock and despair and desperation and frustration, and I'm now 8 years in, just fucking angry. There is, you know, I am just so angry. Listen, see that guy there? That's Ben Snuggs. He's whatever he is, deputy chief. He looks a nice bloke. He really does look a nice bloke. I'm sure. You know, and I'm sure he is a nice bloke. You know, he's. I think he's an MBE. He's won loads of medals. I'm sure he's a nice bloke. But Jesus Christ, you know, how are we not? How are we not now talking about Didcot properly in retrospect? You know, the 23rd of February will be forever etched in my consciousness. It will. But it shouldn't trigger this. You know, it should, you know, I'm probably committed to doing this kind of thing until I pop my clogs or retire. The 23rd of February should roll around and I should open the show. Good morning, everyone. Don't forget, today is Didcot Day. Now, on with the show, because it's over and done with. Not to keep dredging it up and pouring over it. Because I'm at the point now, to be perfectly honest with you, I think I'm doing it more to remind Natalie, Sadie, and all the other family members that I and we haven't forgotten them. Not much more than that. You know, I mean, I have met with one of the guys at the HSE that has been doing a lot of work with the NFDC, and trust me, he knows what I've been saying because he's watched it. I hope he's watching today. I hope you feel terrible. I really do. I hope every single comment on this show makes you squirm. And I would say the same again. I'm sure he's a really good police officer. I'm sure he's a lovely fella. I'm sure he and I, under different circumstances, would get on like a house on fire. But I hope this show is making you absolutely squirm and consider your position. Mick Silver says, we are not growing for you, Mark. Not with what time I have left. I will not stop digging and prying. Fair play to you. Natalie Huxtable says, you are our biggest supporter. Thanks, Nat. You've got a knack, madam. You have a knack. Whenever I see your name, I get a lump in my throat. Stop doing that, would you? One of these days, Natalie, you and I will be in the same room at the same time. I owe you a hug. Let's just put it like that, and I'll leave it there. Why don't people see what they're doing? Absolutely nothing. The NFDC and HSC should be ashamed of themselves in letting it come this far. Dan, I agree. In the interest of balance, there is nothing directly that the NFDC could do. What they could do indirectly, though, is to bring every single time they have a regional meeting, every time they have a national meeting, every AGM, every seminar, they should be holding the HSE and Thames Valley Police to account. Not being all pally and, oh, you know, we're doing joint seminars with the HSE. Aren't we important? A, you're not, and B, the HSE has dropped the ball. Why are you giving them the time of day? Dan Cullen says, another question is the foreman. What pressure were they put under to get the job moving forward? Was there shortcuts? This is another issue. We in demolition construction have peer pressure pushed beyond our capabilities. Wish I knew. Here is, Dan, thank you for that, because you've just prompted me to put this out in the open. Half of a boiler house collapsed and it landed on 4 guys. Mick Collins was recovered the same day or the day after, and then the other 3 guys laid there undiscovered for another 7 months. 8 years have passed since that happened. And to this day, I don't know, nobody knows, whether a demolition worker did something wrong, a demolition contractor did something wrong, there was negligence, the client or the developer was at fault, or there was an intrinsic fault in the design and construction of the boiler house. And I also don't know if there were any other extenuating circumstances whatsoever. It could have been an act of God. It could have been a localized earthquake. We don't know. After 8 years, we don't know. We don't know if there was pressure being placed on the demolition contractor to get the job done quickly. We just literally have no idea whatsoever after 8 years. At least he gets to go home and see his family and friends after work. What would his feelings be if he knew one of the blokes? Would he have let it go this far? Yeah. Yeah, and listen, Ben Snuggs, if you're watching this, in the nicest possible way, I keep saying I'm sure you're a lovely fella, and I'm sure you're a very good police officer, so please don't take this personally. But you in the police service, and much the same, and I know we've got Mick Saunders is here, he's ex-military, same thing. You will have encountered periods in your policing career probably where your life and your well-being has hinged upon the presence of your fellow officers. That's demolition. That's how these guys work. And that point there, would you let it go this far if it was one of your blokes? Don't think you would. And listen, I realise it was a weird analogy to draw, and you can't compare one case with another because there will be lots and lots of unique features on both. But it does strike me as awfully odd that an attractive blonde female financial advisor is recovered from potentially hundreds of miles of river, and the whole thing is done and dusted in 6 months, and some hairy-ass demolition workers perish under thousands of tons of steel. Nothing. And I'd say the same about any kind of knife crime. If it's a teenager from the wrong end of Brixton, chances are it will go on and on and on. If it's a politician or a doctor or a lawyer or a financial advisor, chances are it will be given some kind of priority. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Dan Cullen says, by now, if in another country this would have been done and dusted in 2 to 3 years maximum, why are these bodies taking 8 years? No further to the truth. Boils my blood. I mentioned it. Direct comparison. About a year, possibly 2 years after Didcot, a boiler house, again, a power station, a boiler house collapsed in Ohio in the States. 2 men were killed. Their bodies were, this was over the Christmas period, just before Christmas. Despite that, their bodies were recovered in about 3 weeks, and the whole thing was investigated, prosecuted, case closed, compensation awarded and everything else in just under 18 months. And when I spoke to one of the guys, one of my friends over in the American demolition industry, he said, it wasn't like he was trying to, get one up on us. He basically said, that's how we do it. 18 months is the absolute maximum. We ain't going beyond that. 18 months. And here we are, 8 years. 8 years. And I keep coming back to this. 8 years and not finished. I would strongly urge somebody within the Thames Valley Police to keep a copy of the letter that you've issued today, or the statement that you've issued today, because chances are you're going to need it next year. Maybe change the names, or change the order a little bit, but chances are you're going to need that again next year. You may even need it the year after that, and the year after that. Mixon says, I wonder, or can you see anyone from the NFDC watching this? More importantly, have the bollocks to comment. I can't. I can't. The only people I'm aware of. That's not true. Here on the main part of the show, I am aware of anybody that comments. If you comment, I can see you. Over on Instagram, I can see anyone that joins the stream. I have not seen anyone from the NFDC on either. Mick Saunders says, and if they are and don't, and then there is no respect from the NFDC, the loss of respect from us who are waiting for your comment will be terminal. I know what you're saying, Mick, and I want to. I'm going to go back to Mick Norton in a minute. All the Micks are ganging up on the NFDC today. Let's not lose sight of the fact. Have I lost faith in the NFDC? Yes, I have. They didn't stand up for the industry on red diesel. They're not standing up for the industry on embodied carbon, and they most assuredly have done nothing to stand up to the HSE and Thames Valley Police over Didcot. I have lost all faith in the NFDC. I no longer believe them to be relevant. However, please let's not lose sight of the fact that the people directly responsible for the 8 years that have transpired without conclusion, it's not the NFDC, it's not the IDE, it's not the European Demolition Association. It is Thames Valley Police first and foremost, because they have primacy, and the Health and Safety Executive because they are their co-investigator. That's where the real blame lies. Yes, the NFDC and the IDE should have shouted louder. They should be shouting louder. They should be putting as much pressure as is humanly possible upon Thames Valley Police and upon the Health and Safety Executive. And in that, they have failed. They have completely failed. But even then, bearing in mind the NFDC these days, and it's shrinking by the day, I've been saying for quite some time now that there are 130 members. Well, they've lost McCormack's, they've lost Waldridge, they've lost Wright, and they've lost Squibb. So, they're probably down to roughly half the size they were when I started working for them. With that smaller membership and with that little influence now, frankly, how much difference could they have made? Thames Valley Police might have invited the president or the chief exec in for a chat, give them a cup of tea and a biscuit, and then sent them on their way and said, well, yeah, so what? Because 130 members or less doesn't really count for a great deal, does it? Despite what I've just said, Mick Dalton says the NFDC CEO should be stood on Parliament Square today, up behind the TV commentators holding up a big bloody placard saying justice for Didcot. Do you think that would help? Do you think anyone in Parliament Square would even know what Didcot actually was? They'd probably know it as somebody's constituency, but I don't suppose there's a single soul in the whole of Westminster today, or most days, that would have any recollection whatsoever of the fate that befell the four guys on the 23rd of February 2016. Peter McKenna says we should all get in touch with all media outlets and scream from the highest pulpit, justice for Didcot. I realise this is not entirely indicative. The day after Didcot, I did something like 25 TV, radio, newspaper interviews. The year after that, I did about 20. The year after that, maybe 15. The year after that, maybe 10. Last year, I think I did 2. This year, none. As I've already said, in the grand scheme of things, is Didcot as big a deal as Gaza? Is Didcot as big a deal as Ukraine? Is it as big a deal as the farce that is now the House of Commons? To my mind, yeah. Because Gaza and Ukraine, awful though they are, not really our problem. They're hundreds or possibly thousands of miles away. They're not our problem. And the farce in Westminster night before last with the Speaker of the House of Commons, really and truly, who gives a toss? You know, the guy's paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to stand there and say order a lot. Who gives a toss? You know, really. What we're talking about here, and I realise this, I think that's a good comparison to draw. Westminster, or more specifically, the House of Commons, is this tiny, tiny bubble where they all think they are important and stuff. But by and large, we just look at them and laugh. But we too are in a bubble. And while what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Yemen, all of those sort of things, we can block those from our heads. But what happened at Didcot and what is continuing around Didcot affects each and every one of us every single day. There is a possibility. There is a possibility. Let me stop. I'm going to say this very quickly. No one knows what happened at Didcot. There's been rumour and speculation, but no one knows. But there is a possibility that when this race is run and when the industry finally understands precisely the cause of the Didcot incident, that could trigger a fundamental change in industry practice or possibly even legislation. I would love nothing more than for the memory of the 4 guys to be marked with some change in health and safety executive or police procedure whereby there is a limit. You know, what was, I can't remember the name of the little girl that was murdered, but is it Sophie's Law? There was a Sophie's Law. I'd love, you know, I'd like a memorial to the guys and all the things. But if they are not to have died in vain, for somebody to say, yes, actually, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, whatever it is too long. We need to put a ceiling on these investigations of however long it is, however long they decide, and that should be the Didcot law, to my mind. That's my belief. If the general public understand what's going on, they would all be disgusted. I think we should all let it be known. Yeah, I'd be interested to see. I mean, I've not seen the newspapers today. I'd be interested to see if anybody is actually covering this at all. What we've got here. Think about it. 8 years, not even an update on the progress. And maybe that should be the Didcot law. That with something like this, there should be some kind of interim finding presented within a certain period. Now, if you want to go away, HSE, Thames Valley Police, or any other police force, and do all your fancy machinations and your thousands of pages of report, dandy, you crack on, not a problem at all. But you should be held to account to deliver an answer almost entirely to the families first within a set period. And personally, I don't think that the Americans are far off. 18 months, I think, is more than enough. Even if you have, as a family member, you have to sign some kind of NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So we're going to tell you how your loved one was killed, but the investigation remains ongoing, so you are not permitted to speak about it. There you go. Sign that piece of paper. We're all in agreement. Now, at least you understand exactly what happened, and we can go and do all of our fancy reports and stuff. But no. NFCC, I don't think they've got the bullets to answer the question. No, I don't either. I understand that, Mark, but they are a body that represents the demo industry, an effing waste of space. Bearing in mind the discussion that we had on Wednesday night, do they represent the industry? In truth, have they ever? Do they not merely represent those at the very upper echelons of the business? You know, the company owners and the principals. Do they actually represent Dan Cullen and Ken Hatcher and Gary Muirhead? Do they? Have they ever? Is the NFDC a worthwhile organisation? Don't think they are. I feel a few people that are in this industry, well connected, could do a better job. If I didn't want this to be an NFDC witch hunt, but just, I'm here to answer whatever it is that you're saying. What if you're not going? Make no bones about it. Okay, so I talk a lot about things like embodied carbon, and that is a threat to the industry, no question about it. And about this retro first, that's a threat to the industry as well. I talked about red diesel, no. But make no mistake, the incident on the 23rd of February 2016, in which 4 men were killed, is the biggest thing to happen. The biggest, the most important, the most impactful thing to happen in the UK demolition industry in living memory. In living memory. It is the biggest thing. And it's not just the biggest thing here, it's the biggest thing. You know, whenever I talk to the American demolition industry, they ask about Didcot. Japan, they ask about Didcot. Germany, France, Holland, Spain, Italy. Last time I was in Italy, we were talking specifically about Didcot and about the fact that nothing has been done. If you represent the demolition industry, if, as you claim, you are the voice of the demolition industry, why on God's earth are you silent about the biggest thing that's happened to your industry? Mick Silver says, any newspaper given the forum mentioned today? Okay, so I read The Sun and Irish Independent, so not really their cup of tea, but did any other paper mention it? I've not seen. To be honest, I was so focused on what I was doing, I've not gone and looked. I know some of the, I think Construction Inquirer, Construction News have covered it. And as I say, I think one or possibly both have run the statement from the NFDC, because I guess they still believe the NFDC has some relevance. Peter McKenna says, if it doesn't happen in London, Parliament is not interested. That is certainly the truth. Yeah, that is certainly the truth. Example, why not get together and protest like these other people? Is this a local problem? Not a war, nothing against those issues in the world. But if all construction demolition guys, yeah. Leonora Moon's just joined us. Haven't seen Leonora in years. Morning, Leonora. Lovely to see you. Hope you're fitting well. Thank you, Mark, for today, for keeping our brother's memory alive. Let's keep making waves on this terrible accident. I'm committed. Whatever happens with this show, with everything else that I do, when the result, assuming I haven't died by then, if I am still able, physically and mentally, I will be there till the bitter end. Because this has really, really got under my skin, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Mick Saunders says, sorry, gents, I'm getting a bit worked up here, as I knew these boys from years back. I lost enough friends in the army. I just feel so bloody useless. Yeah. Yeah. That I mean, we've mentioned Natalie and Sadie and all the other family members, but there is the actual point, isn't it? I know you always say, you know, your family, friends, and loved ones. You know, Mick has lost actual friends, both in the army, but here as well. I don't know how many people were working over at Didcot on the day that it happened, but it was a big job. I mean, it really was a very, very big job. So my guess is maybe 100, maybe even more. You know, by the time he took everybody else, and they had a very good canteen there. I realise it's a weird thing to remember, but they did have a very good canteen there. And I was in there on one of the occasions. I went up to see the delivery of some attachments from ECY Hallmark, I think, if memory serves me correctly. And we went in for a bit of like mid-morning bacon sarnie or something like that. And the canteen there was heaving, and it was, you know, like when you go into one of those really, really, really good Italian restaurants where you can barely hear yourself think because everybody's excited and everybody's talking over everybody else, and there's a buzz and there's activity, and that was what Didcot was like. All of those people all working alongside each other, you know, probably going for a pint on a Friday afternoon after work, you know, possibly going and doing something else. Mick Collins, for example, was a keen biker. I don't know if anybody else were bikers there, but maybe that was what they had planned for the weekend. You know, we'll jump on the bikes and we'll go for a bit of a spin, blow the cobwebs out. I never got the chance, never got to go home. And I said that when we did a film, I think, to coincide with the 6th anniversary of the incident, the fact that over the course of Didcot opened in sometime in the 60s, so over the course of 50 odd years, literally hundreds, no, literally thousands, possibly even tens of thousands would have walked through the gates there. You know, the people that actually kept the power on, but those that were on maintenance, those that were working in the canteens, those that were sweeping the roads, and thousands and thousands of people walked through the gates and walked back out of the gates. 4 of them walked in and were carried out. 7 months, well, 3 of the 4 were carried out 7 months after they perished. Peter McKenna says inquiries into deaths on construction and demolition sites in the UK last as long in Australia and the USA. Some cases over there are still ongoing for as long as Didcot. Listen, I'll take your word on that. But as I say, when I spoke to my man over in the States, he said 18 months was pretty much the rules. The legacy of Didcot will be that the Thames Valley Police, HSC, CPS and NFTC are totally incapable of investigating workplace accidents of complexity. There is a guy in the industry. I'm not going to name him. I think he said it publicly, but I'm not going to name him because it's not my place to do it. But there's a guy that you all know. He's been on this show enough. When Didcot happened, not immediately, but you know, within months or possibly the first year of it happening, he was approached with the offer of being an expert witness when any prosecution ultimately came to be, and he declined. And he declined because he said, his words, he did not believe that the health and safety executive had sufficient knowledge to properly investigate an accident of this nature. Now, you might argue that maybe as a demolition man himself, maybe he should have offered that expertise, but that was not the role they were offering him. What they were asking was basically to double check their work. And he had so little faith in the HSE being able to deliver a proper, thoroughly investigation that he declined. So what does that tell you? Got a bunch of comments over on LinkedIn. I'm just making sure they're all coming through. Yes, I think they are. That's good to see. Okay, I'll go back to this. Peter, I'm guessing you're putting up emojis or something like that because I can't actually read what they are. We've gone beyond the hour, which frankly is not unusual. I think I've pretty much took myself out. Have we made any progress? No, we haven't. Have the Thames Valley Police made any progress? No, they haven't. But I do think we've talked the subject out. I made a point of not scripting a large part of today's show, not because I'm lazy, although I am. Vertex Safety over on Instagram. I'm going to share this very quickly. I'll come back to what I was about to say. Vertex Safety, who, given their name, are almost certainly involved in the safety business. The health and safety executive are, in my opinion, a group of very well qualified generalists. Do we want generalists investigating the collapse during demolition of a boiler house? I don't believe we do. Mick Saunders says, think a walk along the river is due. My head hurts, my eyes sting, and my heart is heavy. To the family members watching, my respects, my hopes. And most of all, if you don't mind, I'm feeling your sorrow more than I should. That is very much your entitlement, Mick. Yeah. I'll do the same thing I do every Didcot day, and that's what this is. It is Didcot day. I will finish this. I'll go and have a cup of tea, and it will play on my mind for the rest of the day because that's what it does. And listen, it will play out. You'd be astonished. I do wonder how often we mention Didcot, even in the general course of things. That's one of the things that I think separates us, and I mean us, from the rest, is this never leaves us. It's left the minds and the consciousness of the politicians. It seems to have lost the attention of the media. You could argue that it's lost the attention of the Thames Valley Police, the Health and Safety Executive, the CPS and the NFDC. You could argue that, rightly or wrongly, but it never leaves us. Didcot gets mentioned on this show, maybe not daily, maybe not even weekly, but I don't reckon we go more than about 2 or 3 weeks without it being mentioned in passing. Vertex Safety says exactly my point. Great content, and thanks for illuminating this issue. It's a tiny thing that we do. So yes, I did have a final point. The final point was this. I made a point of deliberately not scripting most of today's show, not because I'm lazy. I've already been here. And not because I couldn't be bothered, because I wanted to speak from the heart and not from the page, which again is one of my issues with the NFDC statement today. It seems to have been written by a PR person rather than somebody with a feeling for the industry, but that's an aside. But there is one final thing that I want to say, and I did write this in advance because it is going to be probably my final point, and I wanted it to be right. I've already offered my condolences to the families of the 4 men that were killed on that terrible day, and I'm not a religious person, but honestly, I'm just praying that one of these days in the not too distant future, you will get some form of comfort, some form of closure. I've spoken endlessly about the impact that this day has had on this industry of ours. You know, individuals like our friend Mick there, anybody else that was there on the day. So I'd like to finish the show with a message to the men and the women of Thames Valley Police and the Health and Safety Executive. On this day, 8 years ago, 4 men were killed at the Didcot A power station. They died needlessly. They died providing for their families and their loved ones. And they died doing their jobs. Now do yours. Please do yours. Dan Cullen says, have a wonderful day and weekend, ladies and gentlemen, and look after yourself, your family, your friends, be it in construction in general, and be supportive of each other. End of the day, we are all merely passing through. Fabulous show today in memory of the men who died. Thank you for that, Dan. It's a weird one, isn't it? Those that watch this show on a regular basis, and I know a lot of you are in the chat, because this show began in the darkest depths of COVID. It began with like a payoff. It's almost I can do it with my eyes closed. There was a thing that I started saying at the end of every show: stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. As I say, it's become. I have notes for my daily show. I don't even bother putting that on there anymore because it's become second nature. Stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. And yet saying that today, look after yourself. Dan, Mick, Peter, Gary, Chris, all of the people that are going to switch this off now and go back to work. Even if you ignore everything else I've ever said, and frankly, I wouldn't blame you for that. Just today, just heed that. Look after yourself. Please look after yourselves. Look after look after your family, your friends, and your loved ones. Because we don't really, you've got a limited time here, and nobody's going to remember you for the hole that you dug or the wobbly building you took down, Andy Darvell. Chris Ford says, I think the rub is at the cost of the investigation that's delaying the answer. Get it over and done with. Get it over and done with. Draw a line in the sand. Hit somebody with a big bloody fine. Recoup your losses that way. Get it over and done with. Mick Saunders says there's a bloody big dog licking his tears away. I'm going to go and do the same thing. I'm going to let a boxer dog slobber all over my face in a minute. Graham Williams says, Mark Anthony, thank you very much for what you do. God bless you, brother. Thank you very much indeed for that, Pete. And Peter McKinnon says, have as good a day as you can, folks. Mind what you're doing. Do it well. Do it safely. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, which kind of leaves it open. Yeah, I want to leave you on that. Very quickly, Monday, we've got a candidate for the Mayor of London role. I've no idea why. But when somebody phones you up and says, I'm standing to be Mayor of London, I'd like to come on your show, what are you going to say? No? So, yes, we've got that happening on Monday, and then on Wednesday, we might, I'm trying to get a double whammy. If you were here, I think it may have been yesterday, we showed you the Z-Quip solution from Moog over in the States, where you can switch out a diesel engine and put in these battery modules. And somebody asked if that was a waste of time, given the potential advent of hydrogen. The guys from Moog, thank you to them, they were watching from America, and they've said, actually, we'd quite like to come on your show too, so that we can actually deal with some of those questions face to face. I say face-to-face, they're in New York, but kind of face-to-face. So the plan, if we can pull it off, is to get somebody from Moog on Wednesday morning to talk about future fuels, future power, electric modules, and all that kind of thing. And then that evening, we'll have Tim Burnhope from JCB, and we can talk about all those things again. That's the plan. And Chris Ford says, nobody goes to work to die or to kill anyone. And let's not lose sight of that. I said that in the preamble. I'm just trying to remind myself exactly what it was I did say. It's here somewhere. Yeah, my words were, which I think Chris has probably put it better than I did. No one allowed this to happen. Ultimately, we might end up with a situation where a person or a company is found to be responsible, to have been negligent or whatever, but nobody just allowed this to happen. 8 years of prosecution has been allowed to happen. And it's been allowed to happen because as an industry, we have sat back and allowed that. Mick Saunders says, "Laters, gents, have a good weekend." Yeah, you too, Mick. Let's make sure that we all go home safely. Have a good weekend, everyone. That's a perfect note on which to end. Yes, please, whatever you're doing, make sure you go home safely. Maybe give your loved ones a bit of a hug when you get there. And I'll see you again on Monday with a mayoral candidate. It's a weird old show, this one, isn't it? Everybody, go and have a fantastic weekend. Keep the Didcot 4 in your thoughts and prayers if you are that way inclined. And I'll see you again after the weekend. Till then, everybody, thanks for being here. All the best.